Welcome back. So today we are talking about card 8, Justice, which if you use a Waite-Smith deck or a more modern deck, you might be a little confused because 8 is usually strength, and Justice doesn't show up until card 11. Well, it's the Waite-Smith deck that we have to explain this decision. Arthur Edward Waite, I believe, wanted to do a bunch of things to sort of cement his legacy beyond his mortal demise. And one of these things was he felt that card 11, traditionally interpreted as force or strength, made a little bit more sense as card 8, appearing earlier in the run of cards, and that justice should be transplanted back to card 11. So that's where we have that switch. And that's just like a bit of tarot history, a little tidbit. If you want to look into that more, please do. But the general idea for this chapter is actually probably one of the most concise and straightforward of all of the chapters in this book. It boils down to essentially this one quote from Carl Jung that Sallie Nichols gives us on page 156. The psyche is a self-regulating system whose aim is not perfection, but wholeness and equilibrium. Which makes a lot of sense as the next step in the journey, where we have figured out who we are and we're testing it out in different societal configurations, which is a weird way to say community, but here we are. And that justice represents this give and take that we have to do with ourself whenever we find ourselves in community with other folks. Because most of the time we have to sort of adapt and shift ourselves and our perception of ourselves a little bit when we are around other people. That's essentially just how society works. The issue, though, is that it should be a balance where you can be the most yourself that you can be with everybody in every situation. Obviously, each situation will have a different balance of who you are and who you are presenting, but the issue becomes harmful when you have to repress or destroy most of yourself. You have to limit who you actually are to be around other people. And there's a bit in this quote a little bit earlier, because that was not the full quote from Jung, but a little earlier in that quote, before what I read, was this concept that Jung is talking about complementary interpretations or complementary parts, not as an extra thing that gets added on to deepen the meaning or to change the meaning, but instead that complementary means, in its original sense, to make complete, to make whole. And that's the way that I've been using complementary throughout this series, is that it's not something else, but the other side, essentially, of a card, of a concept. So that's the general idea. There are two other things I want to talk about. One of them I'm very excited about because it's a piece of ancient Egyptian mythology that I hyperfixated on and has been a special interest of mine for a very long time. But also because it's showing up as a central grounding idea for the card, and it's not just a Christian interpretation, which is really cool. It's not just through the lens of Christian theology. So, if you are not aware of the weighing of the heart, I'm going to explain it to you very briefly here. The weighing of the heart is usually administered by Anubis with Mot and her 42 assessors there to provide the feather, which is a representation of Mot and her domain, which is justice. This serves as a test. You, the deceased, must address all the assessors by name, then recount all the sins you did not commit during your lifetime. Then your heart, which is part of why mummification was such an important aspect, gets placed on a scales opposite the feather of Mot, which represents all of the sins, virtues, and judgments of all of humanity and all of divinity. You are measured against this, your heart and the feather. You are measured, and if your heart is heavier, then you are eaten by Ammit, or sometimes Anubis himself, and your immortal journey ends. But if your heart is balanced or lighter, then you are allowed to pass on to the next stage in your journey through the afterlife, which I think is just a fascinating thing, not because it was like a terrifying thing and it has stuck with me because it was terrifying, which I get, because like meeting 45 gods and then having the possibility of losing your potential as an immortal life, that's not great. What did speak to me and what does speak to me and keeps it important for me is this idea that it's why this figure does not have a blindfold. That if it was just you and your decisions, which were good, which were bad, and which one is heavier, did you make more good decisions or bad decisions? Helpful or harmful, I think is what I should say. It's instead putting it in the context of humanity, and in this example, also divinity. So all of the universe is being judged alongside you, essentially. And I think sometimes a flaw in our justice system is the fact that we try to put that blindfold on and make our judgments completely impartial. At least in Western judiciary systems, which are very, very clearly broken. But in an ideal system, I think we would want to take the context, the human context, and keep that in there, because we wouldn't have to worry about the harmful biases that are there, that we could look beyond our own personal biases and see the situation in its entirety, including the human element inside of it. Hopefully that makes sense. That sounds a little odd as I have spoken it out loud. But the last thing that I want to talk about is a very short quote from the end of this, which ties to another thing that I think ties into the card. So it's a weird tangential relationship. Let's get to it. Sallie Nichols writes on page 162, "We all need to contact a principle of universal harmony and equilibrium in order to be reassured." And this is indirectly related as a concept, indirectly related to a concept that came to me by way of Jason Lemire, who is the head of, I believe, TIFE. It's a theater publication company called Theater is for Everyone. You should look it up if you're in theater. It's a fabulous resource. But I took a workshop from him, and he talked about the 4 types of love that all persons seek, and that the least direct is universal, which is remarkably similar to this principle of universal harmony that Miss Nichols describes. It's that we all want to know that nature, the universe, God, or the gods, that the collective unconscious, or whatever you want to call this idea, accounts for us and cares about our individual well-being. Because I think that's at the basis what the balance of our psyche is looking for. It's looking for something that will make us feel included without having to change who we are. And that's not something that we can just absolutely be, because everybody is different and has different preferences. So we need to sort of like do that weird little dance to balance out who we truly are and who we are in community. So that's everything that I wanted to talk about today. Thank you very much for listening, and I will see you tomorrow with 9, the Hermit. Okay, love you, bye!